The German Shepherd's eyes locked onto mine through the animal shelter bars, and I froze, because those weren't the eyes of a dog looking at a stranger. They were the eyes of someone who'd been waiting 3 years to deliver a message from the dead. My name is Sophie Chen, and I'm a forensic psychiatrist specializing in trauma cases. I don't believe in coincidences anymore, not after what happened last spring. It was April 14th, a Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday until it wasn't. I'd taken the afternoon off, something I rarely did, driven by an inexplicable restlessness I couldn't name. My usual route home would have taken me past the hospital, but instead, I found myself turning onto Riverside Avenue, following some invisible thread I didn't understand. The Riverside Animal Rescue wasn't even on my radar that morning. I'd never owned a pet. My apartment building didn't allow them, and my work schedule made pet ownership impractical. Yet there I was, pulling into the gravel parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me to sanity. The shelter smelled of disinfectant and desperate hope. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Dogs barked from every direction, a cacophony of pleas and warnings and loneliness. I should have turned around, should have recognized this as the impulse decision it was. But then I saw him. Cage 47, tucked in the darkest corner of the adoption wing. The handwritten sign duct-taped to the bars read, Titan, male, 6 years, German Shepherd, final day, behavioral issues, experienced handlers only. The dog sat perfectly still, facing away from the corridor, his black and tan coat dull under the weak lighting. Unlike every other animal in that building, he made no sound, didn't turn to look at potential adopters, didn't beg or plead or perform. He simply sat there, radiating a grief so profound it felt like drowning. I wouldn't go near that one if I were you. I turned to find a tired-looking woman in her 50s, her name tag reading Maria, shelter manager. Her eyes held the particular sadness of someone who'd seen too many endings. What happened to him? I asked. Maria sighed. Owner died 3 years ago. Handler, actually, he was a K9 officer. Dog witnessed the whole thing, shooting during a domestic violence call. The officer's name was Marcus Webb. Titan tried to save him, got shot twice himself. Survived, but he's never been the same. My blood went cold. Marcus Webb? You knew him? I couldn't speak for a moment, couldn't breathe, because Marcus Webb had been my patient. 3 years ago, during his mandatory psych evaluation after his partner, a canine handler named David Rodriguez, was killed in the line of duty. Marcus had witnessed David's death, had held his hand while he bled out on a residential street. Marcus had failed the evaluation. I'd recommended he be placed on extended leave. 2 months later, he'd returned to duty against my recommendation. 4 months after that, he was dead. Dr. Chen? Maria's voice pulled me back. Are you all right? I stared at Titan through the bars, and something impossible happened. The dog turned his head, slowly, deliberately, until his amber eyes met mine. And in those eyes, I saw recognition. Not the recognition of a dog seeing a stranger, the recognition of a soul who'd been searching. I signed the adoption papers in a daze. Maria tried to talk me out of it 3 times. He hasn't eaten voluntarily in 6 days, she warned. We've been force-feeding him. He's shut down completely. The behavioral specialist said he's given up. That's why tomorrow was going to be his last day. It's kinder than letting him starve. I'll take him, I said. Dr. Chen, I have to tell you, he's bitten 2 potential adopters. Not aggressive bites, defensive ones, But still, legally, I'm required to inform you. I'll take him. The paperwork took 40 minutes. Loading Titan into my car took 3 hours. He wouldn't move, wouldn't respond to commands or coaxing or treats. Finally, Maria and I simply lifted him, all 70 pounds of dead weight, and placed him in my back seat. He lay there like cargo, like something already dead. I drove home with my heart hammering, questioning every choice that had led me to this moment. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that explicitly prohibited pets. My landlord, Mrs. Kowalski, lived on the 2nd floor and had the hearing of a bat. But none of that mattered. Something larger was at work here, something I couldn't explain and didn't dare question. Getting Titan up 3 flights of stairs was a nightmare. He wouldn't walk. I ended up carrying him, my back screaming in protest, while he remained utterly limp in my arms. When I finally set him down inside my apartment, he immediately moved to the darkest corner, behind my couch against the wall, and collapsed. He didn't sniff around, didn't explore, just shut down again, facing the wall. I'd bought dog food on the way home, premium brand, recommended by Maria. I filled a bowl with kibble, added some water to soften it, and placed it near Titan's corner. He didn't even look at it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on him, watching his shallow breathing, terrified each time that he'd stopped altogether. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on my bed and lay down on the floor, 6 feet from where he'd wedged himself against the wall. "I don't know why you're here," I whispered into the darkness. "I don't know what Marcus wanted me to understand. But I'm listening now. Whatever message you're carrying, I'm ready." Silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums. Then, in the darkness, Titan spoke. Not with barks or whines, with a low, sustained howl that raised every hair on my body. It was a sound of such profound, ancient grief that I found myself crying without understanding why. A sound that said, "I've been waiting so long, so very long." The howl lasted maybe 30 seconds, then silence again. But something had shifted. Some door had opened. I woke at dawn to find Titan standing over me, his face inches from mine. His breath smelled like decay and neglect. His eyes were sunken, red-rimmed. But he was looking at me now. Really looking. "Hey," I whispered. His nose touched my forehead, the gentlest pressure. Then he turned and actually walked, to the water bowl I'd set out and began to drink. I sat up slowly, afraid any sudden movement might break whatever fragile connection we'd formed. Titan drank for a full minute, then approached his food bowl. He sniffed it, circled it. Finally, with what seemed like immense effort, he began to eat. I called in sick to work. Called in sick the next day, too. Spent 72 hours watching Titan slowly return to the world of the living. On the 3rd day, as I was reviewing case files on my laptop, Titan approached and dropped something at my feet. A toy, one of the ones I'd bought him, a cloth bone with squeakers. He'd pulled it from the bag I'd left by the door, the only initiative he'd shown since arriving. I picked it up, confused. "You want to play?" But Titan didn't want to play. He took the toy gently in his mouth and walked to my bookshelf, stood there, staring, until I followed. Then he dropped the toy directly in front of a specific spot on the bottom shelf. A book I hadn't looked at in 3 years. My copy of the police consultation report from Marcus Webb's evaluation. My hands shook as I pulled the file. Inside, clipped to the psychological assessment, was a photograph I'd forgotten about. Marcus and his K9 partner David, both in uniform, standing with their respective dogs. David with his German Shepherd, Max, Marcus with... I stared at the second dog in the photo, then at Titan, who was watching me with those knowing amber eyes. The dog in the photograph was Titan. That's impossible, I breathed. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. Marcus Webb's dog hadn't died in the shooting. He'd survived, had been rehomed after Marcus's death. Somehow, through channels I couldn't fathom, he'd ended up at Riverside Rescue under a different name, waiting for me. I sat on the floor, the photograph trembling in my hands. What do you need me to know? Titan walked to my coat closet, stood before it, utterly still. When I opened the door, he immediately nosed aside my jackets until he revealed the back wall. Then he began scratching at a specific spot, low and to the left. There was nothing there, just drywall. But Titan was insistent. He scratched and scratched, occasionally looking back at me as if to say, "Here, dig here." Titan, I can't just tear apart my wall. His whine cut through my protest, a sound of such urgency that I found myself grabbing a screwdriver from my kitchen drawer. The drywall came apart easily, too easily. Someone had already cut this section, had patched it back together hastily. Behind it, hidden in the space between studs, was a metal lockbox. My apartment had belonged to Marcus Webb. 3 years ago, after his death, it had been cleaned out and rented to me. No one had ever mentioned he'd hidden something in the walls. The lockbox wasn't locked. Inside, I found 3 items: a thumb drive, a handwritten letter, a photograph of a young girl, maybe 9 years old, with dark hair and frightened eyes. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. Marcus's handwriting, familiar from the notes in his eval file. Dr. Chen, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and Titan found you. I trained him to find you, to bring you here, if anything happened to me. I know that sounds insane. You'll think this is paranoia, trauma response, breakdown, all the things you documented in my file. But you were right about one thing. I was carrying something too heavy to survive. David's death wasn't random. It wasn't just a domestic call gone wrong. He found something that connected 3 seemingly unrelated cases, child disappearances. All girls, ages 8 to 11, all from different counties, all dismissed as runaways. David saw the pattern, started investigating off the clock. He told me about it 2 days before he died, showed me his notes, the connections he'd made, said he was going to take it to the captain the next morning. He never got the chance. The call that night, the domestic violence call where David died, was a setup. I know because I saw the dispatcher's face when we got the address. Recognition, fear. She knew we were being sent into an ambush. I tried to tell Internal Affairs. They buried it, transferred me to another precinct, put me on mandatory leave, made it clear that pursuing this would end my career, or worse. But I couldn't let it go. David's last words weren't about the shooter or his family. They were, "Marcus, find the girl, find Hannah. She knows." I found her. The girl in the photograph. Hannah Voss, age 9, reported as a runaway 3 weeks before David died. Except she didn't run away. She was taken, and somehow she escaped. She's the only one who ever escaped. I've been watching her from a distance. She's in foster care now, 4th home in 3 years. No one believes what she says about what happened to her. They think it's trauma-induced fantasy. But I've seen the scars, Dr. Chen. I've documented them. They're real. The thumb drive contains everything I have. David's original notes, my investigation, names, addresses, financial records I probably shouldn't have accessed. Evidence of a network that goes higher than I ever imagined. I don't trust anyone in the department anymore. Can't risk giving this to law enforcement. But you work outside the system. You have credentials, connections, ways to make people listen that I don't have. Find Hannah. Protect her. Tell her story. The story they keep silencing. If something happens to me, it'll look like a suicide or an accident. Don't believe it. And don't stop digging. Titan knows how to find Hannah. I trained him on her scent. He'll take you to her. I'm sorry to put this on you. But David died trying to save these girls. I won't let his death mean nothing. Marcus Webb. I read the letter 3 times, my medical training warring with the evidence in my hands. This was textbook paranoid delusion, exactly what I'd worried about during Marcus's evaluation. Except Marcus had hidden these items before his death, had trained Titan to find me specifically, had been found dead 2 months after writing this letter. His death ruled an accidental overdose of his prescription anxiety medication. An overdose of medication I had prescribed. I looked at Titan, who sat watching me with infinite patience. Is this real, or am I losing my mind? He stood, walked to my front door, and waited. The thumb drive contained 247 files, police reports, news clippings, financial records, surveillance photos, and a video file dated 4 days before Marcus's death. I clicked on the video. Marcus appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a motel room. His face was gaunt, eyes shadowed. This wasn't the man I'd evaluated. This was someone being hunted. Dr. Chen, if you're watching this, everything went wrong. I need you to know, I'm not suicidal. I'm not using. Whatever they say I did, whatever way they say I died, don't believe it. They're coming for me because I got too close. Because Hannah finally told me who took her. And it's not someone I can arrest. It's not someone I can touch. He leaned closer to the camera. They own people, Dr. Chen. People in positions we're supposed to trust. And they've been doing this for at least 15 years. Hannah's case goes back that far. The pattern David found. Different girls, different times, but the same network, same transfer points, same auction system. My stomach turned. Auction system. Hannah escaped from a staging house, a place where they keep the girls before moving them. She ran during a transfer, stayed hidden for 3 days before someone found her. By the time police investigated, the house was clean. No evidence. Hannah's story was dismissed as trauma fabrication. Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But I found the house, Dr. Chen. I went inside, and there were things, details Hannah described that she couldn't have known unless she'd been there. Specific things, the layout, the door locks, the pattern on the wallpaper in the room where they kept her. He reached off camera, then held up a photograph. This was in the basement, hidden behind a false panel. The image showed a small, windowless room, chains on the wall, children's drawings covering every surface, desperate, terrifying artwork that documented years of suffering. There are dates on some of these drawings, Marcus continued. Going back to 2005, 18 years of this. 18 years of girls disappearing and no one connecting them because they're all written off as runaways. He set down the photograph. Hannah told me something else, something I need you to hear. She said the man who took her wore a ring, gold with a specific emblem, a scales of justice symbol. She drew it for me. Marcus held up a child's drawing. My blood froze. I recognized that ring. I'd seen it dozens of times. Judge Ronald Pearson wore that exact ring. The judge who'd presided over multiple family court cases I'd been called to testify in. Who sat on the board of 3 child welfare organizations. Who'd been nominated for a humanitarian award for his work with foster children. I know what you're thinking, Marcus said, reading my future shock. I thought the same thing. It's too big, too protected. How do you fight something like this? How do you prove it? He leaned back, exhausted. You start with Hannah. You get her story documented properly. You use your credentials to make people listen. You find the other survivors because I think Hannah isn't the only one who got away. And you use Titan. He's the only one I trust now. The only one who can't be bought or threatened or silenced. The video ended abruptly. The timestamp showed Marcus had recorded this at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday. By Saturday morning, he was dead. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, Titan's warm bulk pressed against my leg, and made a choice that would alter the trajectory of everything. I called into work and requested a month's leave, told them I was dealing with a family emergency. Then I packed a bag, leashed Titan, and set out to find Hannah Voss. The address on Marcus's file led to a foster home in Ridgemont, 2 hours north. A tired suburban house with peeling paint and an overgrown lawn. I'd called ahead, identified myself as a forensic psychiatrist conducting a long-term study on trauma recovery in foster children. The foster mother, Mrs. Ramona Price, had been surprisingly cooperative. Hannah's a sweet girl, Ramona told me when I arrived. Quiet, keeps to herself. But I worry about her. She has nightmares, talks about things that... She lowered her voice. Things that sound like trauma memories. But her case files say she was never actually abducted, that she ran away and made up the story for attention. I'd like to speak with her, I said carefully, if she's willing. Ramona called Hannah downstairs. The girl who appeared looked smaller than her 12 years, with dark hair that fell over her face like a shield. She froze when she saw Titan. "That's a police dog," she whispered. "His name is Titan. He used to work with an officer named Marcus Webb." Hannah's eyes widened. Then, to my shock, she dropped to her knees and began to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Titan walked to her immediately, pressed his head against her chest, and let her cling to him while she wept. "He came back," Hannah sobbed into Titan's fur. "Marcus said he'd protect me, he promised, and then he died and I thought no one would ever believe me again." Ramona stared at us, shocked. "Hannah, do you know this dog?" "Marcus used to visit me," Hannah said through her tears. "Secret visits. He said he was gathering evidence, that soon everyone would know I was telling the truth. He brought Titan sometimes, said Titan would remember me, that if anything happened, Titan would find someone who could help." She looked up at me, this small girl who'd survived horrors I could barely imagine. "Are you that someone?" I knelt beside her. "Yes, and I'm going to make sure your story is heard this time. But I need you to be very brave. Can you tell me everything you remember? Everything they told you to forget?" Hannah nodded. "I wrote it all down. Marcus told me to. Said one day someone would need to know." Rate medium. Hannah's written testimony was 43 pages. Single-spaced, cramped handwriting, the work of years of secret documentation. She'd hidden it in a hollowed-out book, Alice in Wonderland, a detail that made my chest ache. We sat in Ramona's kitchen while Hannah read portions aloud, her voice steady but hollow, like she'd disconnected from the words to survive telling them. "I was taken on March 14th, 3 years ago. I was walking home from school. A van pulled up, someone grabbed me, put something over my face. I woke up in the basement, the room with the chains." "How many others were there?" I asked gently. "6. When I arrived, there were 6 of us, different ages. One girl, Elena, had been there for almost a year. She taught me the rules, how to be quiet, how to make them think you were cooperative. She said the ones who fought disappeared and never came back. Hannah's hands shook as she turned pages. They didn't hurt us at first, just kept us locked up, fed us, made us clean ourselves. Elena said they were preparing the inventory. The clinical language made my stomach turn. They had visitors sometimes, people who would come look at us through the window in the door, never spoke to us, just looked. Elena said they were choosing, that once you were chosen, you'd be moved to a different place. She didn't know where. No one who left ever came back. Did you ever see their faces? The people who kept you? Masks. They always wore masks. Except him. Hannah's voice dropped. The man with the ring. He didn't think we'd ever be free to identify him. He came 3 times while I was there. He was in charge. The others were afraid of him. When he visited, everyone acted different, nervous. Can you describe what he looked like? Hannah pulled out a drawing, remarkably detailed for a child artist. Judge Pearson's face stared back at me from the page, every feature precise. The cold eyes, the thin mouth, the distinctive scar on his left cheek from a car accident when he was younger. There was no mistaking it. On the 4th week, they said I was being moved, that someone had requested me specifically. They put me in a van with 2 other girls. We were supposed to go to somewhere called the Transition House. Elena had told me that once you went to transition, you never came back. How did you escape? The van crashed. We were on a highway and there was an accident. The van rolled. The back doors broke open. I wasn't tied like the other girls. They hadn't secured me yet. I ran into the woods, kept running until I couldn't run anymore. Found a gas station 3 days later. The woman who worked there called police. Hannah's eyes held a truth beyond her years. But when the police went back to find the van, find the crash site, there was nothing there. Like it never happened. The detective said I must have dreamed it. Must have run away from home and made up a story to avoid getting in trouble. My own parents started to believe them. That's when Marcus found you? 6 months later. He said he'd been investigating on his own time, that his partner had died trying to expose what was happening. He believed me. He was the only one. She looked down at Titan, who had never left her side. Marcus said that even if something happened to him, the truth would come out. Because dogs never forget, and Titan would find someone who could help. She met my eyes. He found you. I spent 3 days in Ridgemont, documenting everything. Hannah's testimony, her scars, Ramona's observations. On the 4th day, I made copies of everything, stored them in 3 different locations, sent encrypted files to trusted colleagues. Because if Marcus was right, if this went as high as he believed, I needed insurance. Then Titan and I drove to the police station where Marcus had worked. Captain Sarah Mendoza met me in her office, late 50s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for integrity. I laid out everything. Marcus's letter, the evidence files, Hannah's testimony, the photograph of Judge Pearson's ring. Mendoza listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back, face unreadable. Dr. Chen, do you understand what you're asking me to do? Judge Pearson is one of the most respected jurists in this state. His reputation is impeccable. The mayor appointed him to lead the task force on child welfare. If we investigate him based on this evidence and we're wrong, and if we don't investigate and we're wrong, I countered, how many more girls die? Mendoza's jaw tightened. She looked at Titan, who sat perfectly still beside me. That's Marcus's dog. Yes. Marcus came to me 2 months before he died. said he had evidence of corruption in the department, that the call where David died was a setup. I told him he was experiencing PTSD, that he needed help. 3 weeks later, he overdosed. Did you believe it was suicide? She looked me in the eye. No, but I couldn't prove it. The investigation was shut down fast, too fast. And then everyone involved in David's case started being transferred, reassigned, pushed out. Anyone who asked questions found themselves on the wrong side of internal affairs reviews. She stood, walked to her office window. The dispatcher who sent them to that call? Melissa Torres. She quit 2 weeks after David died, moved across the country, won't return calls. The investigating officer, retired early on medical leave. The witness who called in the domestic violence, never existed. Wrong number on the report. Every lead turned into a dead end. Mendoza turned back to me. I've been a cop for 34 years. I know what a cover-up looks like, but this would require coordination at levels I don't have access to. Evidence I can't gather without raising red flags that would get people killed. So we do nothing? I didn't say that. Mendoza pulled a card from her desk drawer. FBI. Special Agent Jennifer Kowalski, Crimes Against Children Division. She's investigating a trafficking network that spans multiple states. She's been trying to get local cooperation, but she keeps hitting walls. Maybe it's time to bring in the feds. She handed me the card. Call her. Give her everything you have. But Dr. Chen, watch your back. If Marcus and David were killed for getting too close, whoever's behind this won't hesitate to go after you too. I left the police station with Titan and a bone-deep certainty that I'd just painted a target on my own back. Agent Kowalski met me in a coffee shop the next morning. Early 40s, short hair, eyes that had seen too much. I'd brought copies of everything. She reviewed each document with clinical precision. Finally, she closed the folder and looked at me. Dr. Chen, I'm going to tell you something off the record. We've been tracking this network for 7 years. We know it exists. We know it's large, organized, and protected at high levels. But every time we get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. Digital trails vanish. We've had 3 agents compromised, their covers blown before they could gather actionable intelligence. Then how do we stop it? We need someone on the inside, someone they don't know is working with us, someone who has access to the victims and can document their testimony in a way that's legally admissible. Someone like you. My blood chilled. You want me to be bait. I want you to do what you're already doing, documenting Hannah's case, but formally, as part of a study on trauma recovery and trafficking survivors. We'll set you up with credentials that make you look legitimate. You'll reach out to other foster children, other runaways, and interview them. We believe there are at least 12 girls in the network right now. If we can get testimony from survivors, if we can build a pattern that's undeniable, they'll know, I said. If I start interviewing trafficking victims, whoever's behind this will figure out what I'm doing. Probably. Which is why you'll have protection, surveillance, and Titan. She nodded at the dog. Marcus trained him as a detection K9. He can identify fear pheromones, stress markers. If someone's lying or dangerous, he'll alert. I looked at Titan, who watched me with those knowing amber eyes. This was what Marcus had prepared him for. This was the message he'd been carrying. How long? I asked. 6 months, maybe less if we get lucky. You'll interview children across 3 counties, document their stories. We'll use your findings to build a case that even protected people can't hide from. And if something happens to me? Kowalski's expression hardened. Then we make sure your documentation survives, and we finish what Marcus and David started. I should have said no, should have handed over everything and walked away. But I kept seeing Hannah's face, the drawings from that basement, Marcus's final message. I'll do it, I heard myself say. And just like that, I stopped being just a psychiatrist and became something far more dangerous. A witness who refused to stay silent. The next 4 months were a descent into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. With FBI backing and fabricated credentials, I became Dr. Sophie Chen, researcher for a multi-state trauma recovery study. I interviewed 43 children in foster care across 3 counties. 17 of them had stories like Hannah's. 17 had been trafficked, escaped, or been released, and had their testimonies dismissed as fantasy. 17 were still living with the knowledge that no one believed them, but Titan believed. And so did I. Each interview I documented. Video recordings, medical examinations, psychological evaluations. I built a database of evidence so comprehensive that even the most corrupt judge couldn't dismiss it. And slowly, the network structure emerged. It wasn't just Judge Pearson. He was a node in something much larger. We identified 6 others in positions of power: 2 state senators, a deputy police chief, a child services director, a prosecutor, and a family court attorney, all connected, all protecting each other, all profiting from an auction system that had been operating for at least 18 years. The staging house Hannah described? We found it, abandoned now, but the FBI's forensic team uncovered evidence in the walls, the floors, traces that matched Hannah's testimony exactly. We identified 8 missing girls who were still alive, still in the network. Kowalski's team was building a case for a coordinated raid, arrests that would happen simultaneously to prevent anyone from warning the others. But then, in October, everything went wrong. I was interviewing a girl named Mia, age 11, in her foster home in Riverside County. She was telling me about the man with the ring when Titan suddenly stood, hackles raised, a low growl vibrating through his chest. Someone was outside. I moved to the window. A black SUV was parked across the street, windows tinted. As I watched, the driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Tall, well-dressed, with a distinctive scar on his left cheek. Judge Ronald Pearson. He looked directly at the house, directly at the window where I stood, and smiled. "We need to leave," I said to Mia. "Right now." But Pearson was already walking toward the house, and he wasn't alone. 3 other men emerged from the SUV, moving with military precision toward the entrances. I grabbed Mia's hand, grabbed my phone, hit the emergency number Kowalski had given me. "He's here. Pearson found us. We need—" The line went dead. I looked at my phone. No signal. They were jamming communications. Titan positioned himself between us and the front door, his entire body coiled with lethal intent. This was what Marcus had trained him for. This was his final mission. The doorbell rang. Cheerful, innocent. "Dr. Chen," Pearson's voice came through the door. "I think we need to talk about your research. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstandings about your intentions." I looked around frantically. The house was old, with a basement access through the kitchen. I grabbed Mia and ran, Titan following as the front door splintered inward. We made it to the basement just as I heard footsteps pounding down the hall above. The basement was unfinished, dank, with a small window well near the ceiling. Too small for me, but maybe big enough for Mia. "Listen to me," I said, gripping her shoulders. "You're going to climb through that window. You're going to run to the neighbor's house and scream until someone calls the police. Do you understand?" "What about you?" "Titan and I will keep them busy. We'll be fine. But those men can't be allowed to catch you again. Promise me you'll run." Mia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I boosted her up to the window well. She squeezed through just as the basement door burst open. Pearson and 2 men descended the stairs. Titan didn't wait. He launched himself at the first man, 60 pounds of trained fury that drove the man backward into the stairs. The second man pulled a gun. And then everything became chaos. Titan's jaws closed around the gunman's wrist. The weapon discharged, the bullet striking the basement wall 6 inches from my head. I grabbed a piece of pipe from a broken shelf and swung it at Pearson, catching him across the shoulder. He stumbled back, shock and rage warring on his face. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled. "No idea how far this reaches. They'll kill you for this. They'll erase you. Then I'll die, knowing I tried to stop you." Sirens, distant but growing closer. Mia had done it. She'd reached help. Pearson's face twisted with calculation. He looked at his 2 associates, one clutching his bleeding wrist where Titan had torn through flesh, the other sprawled unconscious on the stairs. "This isn't over," Pearson said, backing toward the stairs. "You understand that, don't you? You can't protect all of them. You can't watch everyone every moment. We'll find the gaps. We always do." He disappeared up the stairs just as police flooded through the house above us. Blue uniforms, shouting, weapons drawn. But I knew with sickening certainty that Pearson would walk away clean. He always had. I was right. Pearson claimed he'd come to the house after receiving an anonymous tip about child welfare violations. Said he'd been investigating me for conducting unauthorized interviews with vulnerable minors. Said his associates were private security, that they'd acted in self-defense when attacked by an aggressive animal. The investigation dragged on for weeks. During that time, 3 of our 17 survivors recanted their testimonies. Their foster families suddenly received generous financial aid from anonymous donors. 2 families relocated out of state without explanation. Agent Kowalski's carefully built case began to crumble. But then, something unexpected happened. I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice, middle-aged, shaking with fear, said, "Dr. Chen? My name is Melissa Torres. I was the dispatcher who sent Marcus Webb and David Rodriguez to the call where David died. I need to talk to you. I can't stay silent anymore." We met in a parking garage at midnight. Melissa was gaunt, haunted, barely resembling the photo from her personnel file. She handed me a thumb drive with trembling hands. "I kept recordings," she whispered, "from that night. The actual recordings, not the ones that went into evidence. The call that supposedly came in about a domestic disturbance. It never existed." The address was fed to me by a supervisor, Lieutenant Gary Chen, who said it was a special tactical operation, that I was to dispatch Webb and Rodriguez and no one else, that I was to log it as a normal domestic call. My blood went cold. "Did you know it was a setup?" Not until I heard the radio traffic. Not until I heard David screaming for backup that wasn't coming because I'd been told to route all emergency calls away from that sector for 30 minutes. By the time I understood what I'd done, David was dead. Tears streamed down her face. Lieutenant Chen came to my apartment that night, told me if I ever talked about what really happened, I'd be found in my bathtub with slit wrists, another tragic suicide. He had photos of my daughter, showed them to me, made it clear that she wasn't safe. "Why are you coming forward now?" Melissa looked at me with hollow eyes. "Because my daughter disappeared 3 months ago. 14 years old. Police are calling her a runaway, but I know better. I know what I helped enable, and now it's come for my family. If I'm going to lose her anyway, I might as well burn it all down." The recordings were damning. They proved the call was fabricated, that David and Marcus had been deliberately sent into an ambush. Combined with Hannah's testimony and the forensic evidence from the staging house, we finally had enough. Agent Kowalski moved fast. Federal warrants were issued for Judge Pearson, Lieutenant Chen, and 4 others in the network. The raids happened at dawn on December 3rd. I watched the news coverage from my apartment, Titan pressed against my legs, both of us barely breathing. Judge Pearson was arrested at his home. The cameras captured him being led out in handcuffs, his face a mask of rage. Lieutenant Chen barricaded himself in his office and had to be tear-gassed out. The deputy police chief attempted to flee the state but was stopped at the airport. By noon, 7 arrests had been made. By evening, 3 of them had started talking, cutting deals, naming names. The network was larger than even Kowalski had suspected. 19 people were ultimately charged. The evidence included financial records showing over $4.2 million in transactions over 12 years. Testimonies from 8 survivors who finally felt safe enough to speak. But the story that broke the media wasn't the arrests. It was the girls. Working from the network's seized records, FBI teams located 12 missing children over the course of 1 week. 12 girls who'd been written off as runaways. 12 families who thought their daughters were lost forever. The reunions were broadcast across every news channel, parents collapsing in grateful sobs. Children, damaged but alive, finally coming home. Hannah Voss was reunited with her parents in a hospital conference room. I was there, at her request, with Titan beside me. When her mother wrapped her arms around her and whispered, "I believe you. I believe everything you told us. I'm so sorry we didn't listen." I had to turn away to hide my own tears. Afterward, Hannah approached me and Titan. She knelt and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck. "Thank you," she whispered into his fur. "Thank you for remembering. Thank you for keeping the promise." Titan licked her face gently, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since that first day at the shelter. Peace. The message had been delivered. The mission was complete. The trials lasted 14 months. I testified in 11 of them, called as an expert witness on childhood trauma and false memory syndrome. The defense attorneys tried everything, claimed the children had been coached, that their testimonies were unreliable, that the evidence had been fabricated. But they couldn't explain away Melissa Torres's recordings, couldn't explain the forensic evidence from the staging house, couldn't explain the financial transactions or the encrypted communications the FBI had uncovered. One by one, they fell. Judge Pearson's trial was the longest. His defense team was the best money could buy. They painted him as a dedicated public servant being persecuted by overzealous investigators. They claimed Hannah's identification was tainted by suggestion. But then the prosecution called a witness no one expected. Elena Reyes. The girl Hannah had known in captivity, the one who'd taught her the rules, the one Hannah thought had been moved and never seen again. Elena had survived. She was 19 now, living under a new identity in protective custody. She took the stand and described in excruciating detail the 3 years she'd spent in the network. The buyers, the auction system, the transition houses. And she identified Judge Pearson as the man with the ring, the one who'd personally selected her when she was 12, who'd visited the holding facilities, who'd been present at transfers. Her testimony lasted 3 days. By the end, several jurors were openly weeping. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all 27 counts. Judge Ronald Pearson was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. 6 others received similar sentences. Lieutenant Chen, facing life in prison, hanged himself in his cell 3 weeks before his trial. The prosecutor took a plea deal and received 30 years in exchange for testimony against the others. By the time the last trial concluded, the network had been dismantled completely. It was over. But for me, the hardest part was still ahead. Marcus Webb's death was officially ruled a homicide. The medical examiner who'd signed off on the accidental overdose came forward after Pearson's arrest, admitting he'd been pressured to falsify the cause of death. Marcus's body was exhumed. The real toxicology report showed he'd been forcibly injected with a lethal dose of his own medication, murdered and staged to look like suicide. David Rodriguez's case was reopened. The evidence now showed clearly that the call was fabricated, the dispatch manipulated, the entire scenario orchestrated to silence him. Both men were posthumously awarded the Police Medal of Honor. Their names were added to the memorial wall at headquarters. Their families received official apologies and settlements that could never compensate for what they'd lost. But the recognition mattered, the acknowledgement that they'd died as heroes, not as casualties of their own weaknesses. I attended both memorial services. At Marcus's, I stood beside his widow, Rebecca, and their 2 teenage sons. Rebecca gripped my hand throughout the ceremony. "He told me about you," she whispered as they played taps. "2 days before he died. He said if anything happened, someone would find you, that you'd understand what needed to be done." "He trained Titan to find me," I said, "to deliver the message." Rebecca looked at the dog, sitting at attention beside me. "Marcus loved that dog. Said Titan understood things humans couldn't. Said dogs see the truth of people, not the masks they wear." She paused. "He was right about you. Titan knew." At David's memorial, I met his sister, Carmen. She was a teacher with David's same warm eyes and gentle smile. She held a photograph of David and his K9 partner, Max. "I never believed David's death was random," Carmen said. "He called me the night before he died, said he was on to something big, that if anything happened I should trust Marcus. And when Marcus died too, I thought the truth would die with them, that no one would ever know." "They made sure we'd know," I said. "They left a map for us to follow. All we had to do was trust them enough to follow it." Carmen looked at Titan. "Marcus's dog?" "Yes. David talked about him, said Marcus trained him to do something special, but wouldn't say what." She smiled sadly. "Now I understand. He trained him to be a guardian, not just of people, but of truth." As the months passed, the survivors began to heal. Hannah started therapy, returned to school, began the long process of rebuilding her life. Mia, the girl I'd rescued from Pearson, was placed with a loving family who specialized in trauma care. She started painting bright, hopeful images that slowly replaced the darkness in her memories. One by one, the girls who'd been found were making their way home. Not all the way, trauma that deep leaves permanent marks, but far enough to smile again, to trust again, to believe that the world could be safe. I visited them sometimes, with Titan, the dog who'd remembered them when the world wanted to forget. The dog who'd carried a dead man's message across 3 years and 17 survivors, and one woman who learned to listen. 6 months after the final trial, I received a call from Agent Kowalski. "Dr. Chen, we've finished processing all the evidence from the network's servers. There's something you need to see." We met at the FBI field office. Kowalski led me to a secure room where a laptop was set up, its screen showing a paused video file. "This was on an encrypted server we cracked last week," Kowalski explained. "It's dated 2 days before Marcus died. He must have uploaded it remotely, probably as insurance in case they got to him before he could deliver everything in person." She hit play. Marcus appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a different motel room from his other recording. But this time, Titan was with him, sitting at attention beside the camera. "Dr. Chen," Marcus said, his voice calmer now, resigned. "If you're watching this, it means Titan found you. Means you followed the trail I left. Means you believed when everyone else dismissed it as paranoia." He reached out and rested his hand on Titan's head. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes closing briefly. I need to tell you why I chose you specifically, why I trained Titan to find you and no one else. It wasn't random. It wasn't just because you evaluated me and might feel guilty enough to listen. Marcus took a deep breath. 3 years ago, when you recommended I be placed on extended leave, you wrote something in your report that I've never forgotten. You said, Officer Webb demonstrates exceptional moral courage and a commitment to justice that transcends policy and procedure. However, his current psychological state makes him vulnerable to manipulation by those who would exploit these very qualities. He should not return to duty until he can distinguish between cases that demand his intervention and cases that would consume him completely. He smiled sadly. You saw what I couldn't see, that my trauma was making me reckless, that I was looking for ways to redeem David's death, even if it killed me. You were right. This case, these girls, it's exactly the kind of thing that consumes people, that destroys them. But you also wrote, should Officer Webb stabilize and return to duty, he would be an asset to any investigation requiring moral conviction over political convenience. He has the rare ability to see victims as human rather than as statistics. This empathy, properly channeled, could save lives. Marcus's eyes glistened. That's why you. Because I needed someone who would see these girls as Hannah saw them, as people, not cases, as survivors, not statistics. I needed someone who understood that sometimes doing the right thing requires burning your life down. Someone who'd already proven they valued truth over comfort. He looked directly into the camera. I know this is going to cost you. Your career, your peace, maybe your safety. I'm sorry for that. But I also know that you're the kind of person who'd rather pay that cost than live with the alternative. That's what makes you dangerous to people like Pearson. You can't be bought or scared into silence because you've already decided that some things matter more than safety. Titan stirred beside him, and Marcus smiled. This dog has been with me through the worst of it. He was there when David died, stayed with David's body until the ambulance came, trying to wake him up. He understands loss in ways humans can't articulate. He understands loyalty that goes beyond death. I've trained him to find you using a scent sample from your evaluation office, to recognize your presence, your stress markers, the truth of you. He'll bring you to Hannah because he knows what she carries, the same grief he carries, the same need to be believed. Marcus leaned closer to the camera. Dogs don't lie, Dr. Chen. They can't. They exist in a state of perfect honesty that humans lost somewhere in evolution. That's why I trust Titan with this message more than I'd trust any person. He won't be compromised, won't be threatened, won't choose safety over duty. Take care of him, and let him take care of you. You're going to need each other before this is over. The video ended. I sat in silence, processing. Finally, I looked at Kowalski. He knew he was going to die. Yes, he'd already figured out how deep the corruption went, knew that speaking up would be suicide. She paused. But he did it anyway. Because that's what heroes do. They choose the impossible right thing over the easy wrong thing, even when it costs everything. I left the FBI office with Titan and drove to the cemetery where Marcus was buried. It was late afternoon, golden light slanting through the trees. I stood before his headstone, Marcus Webb, beloved husband and father, officer, hero. Titan sat beside me, quiet and still. I read your message, I said to the stone. All of them. The letters, the videos, the evidence. You left a map through the darkness, and I followed it. We followed it. The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying the scent of autumn. Hannah's safe now. All of them are. The network is gone. The men who killed you and David are in prison. Your sons know you died a hero, not a casualty. My voice cracked. You were right about me. It did cost everything. My career at the hospital, my peace, 3 years of my life. But you were also right that some things matter more. Titan pressed against my leg, and I reached down to rest my hand on his head. Thank you for trusting me with this, for believing I'd be strong enough to carry it, for giving me Titan. I looked at the dog, who gazed up at me with those ancient, knowing eyes. For teaching me that sometimes the dead speak through the living, that love doesn't end just because breathing does, that some promises transcend death itself. I knelt and placed my hand on Marcus's headstone. Rest now. Your message was delivered. Your mission is complete. The girls you died trying to save, they're home. As Titan and I walked back to the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not peace, exactly. Not closure. But something like resolution. The bone-deep certainty that I'd done what needed doing, regardless of cost. Some missions are worth the price. Some promises are worth keeping, even when the one who made them is gone. And sometimes a dog carries a message that changes everything. I'm writing this from my new office at the nonprofit I founded, the Webb Rodriguez Foundation for Trafficked Children. We provide legal advocacy, therapeutic services, and safe housing for survivors. We train law enforcement to recognize trafficking patterns. Hannah works here now. She's 17, planning to study criminal justice. She wants to be an FBI agent specializing in child exploitation cases. Agent Kowalski has already told her there's a place for her when she's ready. Mia volunteers on weekends, leading art therapy groups for younger survivors. Her paintings hang throughout our building, bright, fierce images of girls with wings, breaking free from chains. Elena Reyes graduated college last year and is now in law school. She plans to become a prosecutor focusing on human trafficking cases. She says she wants to be the voice for girls like she was, the ones who survive and remember everything. Melissa Torres's daughter was found. She'd been held by a splinter group that scattered when the main network fell. The FBI tracked them to Nevada and rescued her along with 3 other girls. She's in therapy, healing slowly, but she's home. Melissa cries every time she talks about it. My apartment still doesn't allow pets. Mrs. Kowalski still has the hearing of a bat, but she stopped complaining about Titan after seeing him on the news. Now she bakes him special treats and tells everyone he's her favorite tenant. Titan is older now, graying at the muzzle. His joints ache on cold days, but his eyes are still sharp, still knowing. He comes to the office with me every day, and the survivors gravitate to him instantly. They understand what I couldn't when I first found him, that some souls recognize each other across trauma. That healing happens in the presence of witnesses who don't require explanations. Last week, we got a call from a police department in Oregon. They had a girl, age 10, claiming she'd been trafficked. No physical evidence, testimony dismissed as fantasy. But there was something in her story that reminded the detective of Hannah's case. Could we help? I looked at Titan, who was already standing, ready. Some missions never truly end. They just change form. Yes, I said, we can help. Because that's what we do now. We listen when others dismiss. We believe when others doubt. We fight when others surrender. And we remember that sometimes the most important messages come not from the living, but from the dead, who refuse to let their deaths be meaningless, who leave maps and train dogs and trust that somewhere, someone will be brave enough to follow. Marcus Webb saved 17 girls he never met. David Rodriguez died trying to protect children he never knew. And a dog named Titan delivered a message across death itself because some promises are too important to break. The work continues. The network may be dismantled, but others exist. They always exist. But now we know how to find them, how to recognize the patterns, how to make sure that when girls like Hannah whisper their truths, someone is finally listening. That's the real message Titan carried. Not just evidence or testimony or the route to justice, but this. Your story matters. Your truth matters. You matter. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to believe and one dog who refuses to forget to change everything. If this story moved you, I hope you'll take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Not for me, but for the real Hannahs and Elenas and Mias whose stories still need telling. Every subscription, every share, every comment helps these stories reach people who need to hear them, whether they're survivors looking for hope or ordinary people wondering if one person can actually make a difference. The answer, as Titan proved, is yes. One person, one choice, one act of courage can shatter darkness that's existed for decades. Marcus Webb once wrote, "The opposite of evil isn't good. It's witnesses who refuse to look away. So don't look away. Listen, believe, act, and remember. Sometimes the most important person in someone's story is the one who shows up when everyone else has given up. Be that person. And if you ever find yourself wondering if fighting impossible battles is worth the cost, just remember a dog named Titan who carried a message through death itself because some promises are too sacred to break. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being the kind of person who believes that stories like this, hard, painful, necessary stories, are worth hearing. Until next time, stay brave, stay compassionate, and never stop listening to the whispers the world tries to silence.